Hey folks, welcome back to the show. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is a very popular topic. It's been around since the beginning of time. It can be free and it can be one of the most powerful strategies for healthy aging. So I'm going to talk about fasting, and I'm going to talk about different types of fasting and some of the different benefits and use case scenarios for different types of fasting. So the first thing I'm going to say is fasting can be the most cost-effective, the most powerful single intervention that we have at our fingertips in order to improve our metabolic health, our metabolic flexibility, our body composition, reduce inflammation, improve gut health, improve blood lipids, like you name it. All of these things can get better if we fast properly at the right time. Now, properly and at the right time is really important, because here's the thing that I see happening with fasting a lot is that one of two things. You mentioned the F word, fasting, and people run screaming from the room. People like my husband, who swears up, down, and sideways that he has never missed a meal in his whole life that he can remember. He just doesn't. So for me, with him, the strategy that I try to encourage him towards is at the very least doing a 12-hour fast. So basically finishing his dinner at 7 o'clock in the evening so that he has 12 hours between then and when he wakes up and has his first meal. So that is a type of fast. It technically in my world isn't really a fast. It's an appropriate pause between the last meal of the day and the first meal of the next day. But in our society where we have become accustomed to eating all the time, that is essentially a fast. And it is a critical window of not consuming calories that allows our body to do the regeneration work that it needs to do overnight so that it can clear out toxins, repair damage, do all the things, and get you ready for the next day. So at a very minimum, I would say that the vast majority of us, unless you've got some kind of a metabolic disorder or you have blood sugar dysregulation that needs to be addressed first, putting 12 hours between your last meal of the day and your first meal of the day is a super easy, super inexpensive, aka cheap, free intervention that right away is going to have good health benefits for you. Now, a caveat here. Fasting is not necessarily for everyone. If you're someone who's had an eating disorder, fasting can be very triggering to old negative patterns. So you're going to want to be working with a professional here to help you to manage your tendencies. Like if you've had an eating disorder, control's a big issue for you, and it's easy, and it may be very easy for you to kind of fall back into some old negative patterns. So I'm not saying you can't, but I'm just saying you have to be cautious. If you're very, very, very underweight, fasting may not be the right thing for you right now, even though the benefits of fasting, like the thing about fasting, it's not all about weight loss, right? It's about reducing inflammation. It's about improving gut health. It's about increasing autophagy, which is cellular turnover. All of those things are benefits. But if you're very underweight, now may not be the time for you to fast, or a shorter fast might be appropriate for you. And we're going to talk about what that might look like. Women who are pregnant, this is not the time to be fasting particularly. Again, if you have a particular condition, if you're working with a medical professional and they tell you that this might be a strategy for you, you can talk about it with them. I don't typically recommend it. I think that your priorities when you're pregnant are to eat a healthy, nutrient-dense diet, and maybe try to avoid too often sliding into that, well, I'm pregnant, I'm just going to have this triple ice cream sundae because I want it, and it's what my baby wants right now. So we're not going to get into the finer details of that, but pregnancy is your invitation to optimize your nutrition as much as you can to build a better baby and to protect yourself while you're building that better baby. And also, if you're a high performance athlete and you're in a high training cycle, this may not be the right time for a fast. Okay. So, I mean, it's self-evident. I'm sure some of you are rolling your eyes, but it bears mentioning. And also, if you're metabolically very dysregulated, it may be that your body doesn't have the metabolic flexibility yet to really manage fasting. So there will be other strategies that you will use. But in the meantime, let's jump into, and I do have some notes here so I can keep myself on track and keep this to the 30 minutes that I like to keep this episodes at. And if you guys decide that you want more on this, last week, we did an entire episode on the fast mimicking diet, which is an incredibly powerful tool. It's very accessible. Unfortunately, the only caveat is, of course, you have to spend some money on those kits, but the kits are very, very well constructed and they make it easy to do a 5-day FMD. So I'm going to talk about what of an FMD is in a second. But before I do that, let's talk a little bit about the different types of fasting. Now, at this point, I'm pretty confident that everybody has heard about intermittent fasting, right? Intermittent fasting usually involves skipping at least one meal. I think for many, many, many people, they will skip breakfast. It's the easiest meal for most people to skip. I would say that you need to exercise some caution here because a lot of the data out there says that, especially for women, but I think for men also, but definitely for women, eating a high protein meal within an hour or so of waking up is the way to really get your metabolism going for the day, and you will eat less as the day goes on. For a lot of people, when they skip breakfast, they become ravenous later in the day. So it may be that skipping dinner, many of you have heard me speak about this before, it is the best meal to skip. Unfortunately, from a socials perspective, it's the toughest meal to skip because that's the time when we get together with family and friends. Guys like Dr. Mercola has said, well, he's single, so it's easy for him to skip dinner. And people who live on their own might have an easier time with it. It's kind of tough when you're busy and you've been working all day and you're preparing a meal for your family. Plus, it's the time when the family comes together to kind of not eat that meal. So do the best that you can. Ideally, I would say eating that first meal, first thing in the morning is great. It also works well with your circadian rhythms, particularly like where I live right now. Like it's 5:25. It's pitch dark out there. So technically, if I was going to respect my circadian cycle, I wouldn't eat until tomorrow. I would have stopped eating an hour ago. It's Saturday night. It's pre-Christmas right now. I'm going out for dinner. It's a thing. It's going to happen. So you do the best that you can, but intermittent fasting, very powerful strategy. And that intermittent fast you can basically have a feeding window is what we call of 8 hours, which is the easiest one. So you're not eating for 16 hours. So let's say you finish eating at 7 o'clock at night, you won't start eating again until 11 o'clock the next morning. Or if you stop eating at, let me do the math, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you wouldn't eat now until 4 o'clock. That's 12, 16 plus 4 until 8 o'clock in the morning. That one's actually really easy if it's easy for you to skip that last meal of the day. So 16:8, 18:6, we've now shortened that eating window even more. And then by the time we get to a 20 and 4, so 20 hours of not eating and 4 hours of eating, we're now getting into a world of one meal a day. Not necessarily. You can eat 2 meals in 4 hours. You can do 1 meal a day. There are a lot of people when they first start doing this that find that they can eat whatever they want in that 4-hour window and still gain benefits from it. I would encourage you, the shorter your eating window is, the more nutrient dense your food must be. Prioritize protein, eat some healthy fats, eat a nice selection of vegetables that grow and live above ground. And then, of course, you can have some starches and things like that, but you just need to be mindful that you're not kind of saying, okay, I'm going to eat 1 meal a day and it's going to be cacio e pepe pasta with like short ribs on top or something, which is not really going to set you up for success in the long term. In general, intermittent fasting is just extremely beneficial. It's good for metabolic flexibility. It's cardioprotective. It helps with metabolic syndrome. We'd see a reduction in abdominal adiposity when it's done right. Basically, as people lose weight, we can see a reduction in blood pressure, resting heart rate, improved lipid profile, improved insulin sensitivity, decrease in waist circumference over time, which is obviously linked to the improvement in insulin sensitivity. But again, intermittent fasting for me is a tool. All fasting strategies are tools that need to be wielded with caution at the right time. What I see happening with intermittent fasting is people get into a groove. It's easy for them. They get into a habit. So it's 5, 6, 7 days a week. They don't eat breakfast. In the long run, this can turn around and bite you. So what I like to do with my clients, when I'm coaching people, is I might have them intermittent fast 3 days a week. Maybe, right? So the body responds particularly well to pulses. So you fast and you feast, and you fast and you feast. You kind of alternate between feasting and fasting. You keep your metabolism guessing all the time. But what ends up happening, and this is true of every strategy that focuses on fasting, is what we achieve at the end of the week is an overall caloric restriction. So why this can be more successful for people and ultimately easier to practice is because instead of going through every single day feeling like you're denying yourself and holding yourself back and trying to eat less, you're actually allowing yourself to eat normally when you eat. And then when you're fasting, you just don't eat. The math at the end of the week for your body is that you've consumed fewer calories. You've eaten less energy. You've consumed less energy. And therefore, on that balance sheet, you're at a caloric deficit. Now, one thing I want to say here, I am not saying that just reducing calories is the only thing involved in fat loss. It just isn't, right? In better body composition. It has to do with timing. It has to do with the foods that you're eating. It has to do with sleep. It has to do with exercise, all the things. But the beauty of fasting is it's a nice little hack that sometimes can kind of mix things up enough that it gets your body responding in a different way. Okay, let's move into a different type of fast. So we also have water fasting. So this is when you're going to do like a 24 to 72 hour fast. And again, with a longer fast, you need to make sure that you check with your doctor or your practitioner and make sure that this is right for you. Because if you have blood sugar issues, this could be too much, too fast for you guys. Fast being the operative word. But 24 to 72 hours, just water. The more metabolically flexible you are, the easier this is going to be for you to do. So that means your body is efficient at flipping between fuel source. So you can burn glucose for fuel or you can burn ketones for fuel. What'll happen after about 24 hours, you'll get into what's called nutritional ketosis. For some people, it takes a little bit longer. And this means that your body is now producing ketones as a byproduct to provide fuel to the body. You're still got glucose on board, folks, because your brain still loves that glucose. But now the glucose is being spared for the brain and the ketones are available for other parts of the body. The cool thing about ketones is they in and of themselves have an anti-inflammatory effect on the system. So lots of benefits here. You're drinking water, which can, number one, help with hunger, but it also helps to flush toxins out. And that's one of the things that can be really make people feel really sick is when we'll talk about the dry fast in a minute, where they're doing a dry fast and they're essentially quite toxic and the body can't get rid of its own toxins because there's just not enough there for the body to work with. Having said that, if this is available to you, the benefits of dry fasting is that you see an increase in autophagy and cellular repair. We get a decrease in inflammation, in part because of those ketones. We see an increase in the detoxification processes of the body. So it ramps up your own detox pathways. We see an increase in stem cell regeneration. And how cool is that? So stem cell release goes up, which obviously leads to regenerative effects. And it may help to reset appetite and improve insulin sensitivity. Now, what I'll say about this one is where I've seen this work really well is when people decide that they're going to do a 24-hour fast, let's say once a week or maybe twice a week. But the way they do it is they stop eating at dinner time, let's say on a Sunday, and they don't eat again until dinner time on the Monday. And in between, they'll drink water. They might drink green tea, which nice thing about green tea is it has appetite suppressing effects. There's also a company called Peak Teas that makes these teas that make it really easy to fast. You can also, if you add some Celtic sea salt to your water, that will not break your fast, and that will also make it easier for you to fast. Supplements like B minerals are fantastic when you're fasting because, again, when we're providing those minerals and electrolytes, all of those things can make that fast easier to bear. Okay. Now, signs that you need to cut bait on a fast is if you have a kick-ass headache, you're starting to get dizzy, you're feeling weak. You know what? It's not a competition. If you made it, 16 hours this time, that's A-okay. Next time, you may make it further. If you make it 18, 20, don't get stubborn. If your body is sending very clear signals that this is not working for you, then you need to pull back, have something to eat, maybe break your fast with a bone broth, something like that. Really nice thing to break the fast with. And you can try again another time. And maybe as your body becomes more metabolically flexible, that fasting window gets bigger. Next one is prolonged fast. So a prolonged fast is defined as anywhere from 48 hours to 5 days. I've done a few of these 5-day fasts. In my case, my body does not like fasting. My head doesn't like it. My body doesn't like it. That being said, I always feel better on the other side. But for most people, sometime around day 3, they start to feel really good. They're flipping into ketosis. They no longer feel hungry. They feel clear. They feel like they've got great energy. This is like the hallmark of somebody who's metabolically flexible and can really kind of soar with these 5-day fasts. This is a great thing to do kind of seasonally every quarter. You get much more deeply into autophagy. So there's a deeper level of cellular cleanup that's happening. Once again, the stem cell production goes up. So you get repair of you could have repair of a lot of different injuries. It can, of course, boost fat loss, improve metabolic flexibility, and also can improve your immune system function. So this one's very, very powerful. It's a lot tougher. It's definitely something, any health condition that you have or metabolic imbalances you have, you're going to want to speak to your practitioner. Again, I would say that water and green tea can be really, really powerful here. There's also another kind of tea that I really like when fasting called yerba mate. This is from Argentina, and not the kind that you drop by at the grocery store, by the way, already made, those yerba mate drinks that are full of sugar and whatever. You want to get yerba mate leaves. You never want to steep it with boiling water because that actually, interestingly enough, causes the yerba mate to produce some kinds of carcinogenic compounds that when ingested can drive cancer. Can you believe that? I mean, it's a thing in Argentina. So if you're making yerba mate tea from the leaves, you want to boil your water, let it come off the boil, wait a minute or two, and then you steep your yerba mate tea when the water is not boiling. Okay, dry fasting. This is hardcore. Okay, so dry fasting usually is a 12 to 24 hour thing. Most of us dry fast overnight, right? But sometimes we don't. Sometimes you might wake up in the night and need a drink. That's okay. But when you dry fast for anywhere for 12 to 24 hours, and I will say there have been medically supervised much longer dry fasts. I've heard of people dry fasting for like a couple of weeks, maybe up to 30 days. It's a bit crazy to even think because we're told that without water, we're going to die in about 3 or 4 days. Turns out that's not exactly true. That being said, it needs to be medically supervised. But the advantage of even a 24-hour dry fast is you get a massive increase in autophagy. You get, again, stimulation of those detox systems and cell repair. It may improve benefits for the skin and even gut health by reducing microbial overgrowth. So this is really interesting, right? Now, the interesting thing about gut health and fasting is if you have inflammation in your gut, again, you need to be working with someone because in some cases, too much fasting can work against you. Not enough fasting can also work against you. So this is where you really want to be working with someone who can look at the particularities of your own situation and tell you what's going to be better for you. But for those of us who have a reasonably okay gut and things are reasonably balanced, overall, periodic, appropriate fasting is going to be beneficial for our gut health. Then we get into something called alternate day fasting. So this is where you're going to eat normally one day, and then the next day you're either going to completely fast, so from dinner to dinner, or you might consume just a few calories, like 500 calories or less. Now, for some people, they just find it easier not to eat. Like it's just less to track. For other people, that little bit of food, what happens is they make it really easily till 12 or 1 o'clock. And then they start to kind of flounder a little bit, like they can't hold it together. So at that point, eating 500 calories of food, which can be a fair amount of food if you play your cards right. Like you can eat like a very beautiful salad with sprouts and rich in polyphenols. You can throw a couple of hard-boiled eggs in there and be well under 500 calories, have a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, like use an app like Chronometer or something to really track your food. But that or a bowl of soup can be really great at tiding you over. You keep those calories under 500 calories, and now you've basically done an alternate day fast. The next day, you're going to eat normally again, and then you're going to repeat. What I like about this type of fasting is you get that push and pull, right? You get feasting and fasting and feasting and fasting. And over time, we see all these things start to normalize in the body. We see that the people tend to lose weight over time. Their metabolic flexibility improves. The metabolic health in general improves. We get a reduction in inflammation and oxidative stress. And we also even see blood lipids like cholesterol and triglycerides improve, normalize as well. So this can be a really, really powerful fasting tool. Again, watch out for eating all the wrong foods, thinking, oh, well, I'm fasting, so I can have the tiramisu or I can have the whatever. It doesn't mean you can never have the tiramisu, but it's just like, in general, keep the food clean, stick to whole foods when you're eating. And then also come the weekend, don't let the wheels fall off the bus completely, but definitely you can go back. You can do this like during the week, do this alternate day fasting so that you're either fasting 2 or 3 days, depending on how you time it. And then on the weekend, you want to go back to eating normally. And that's a really nice rhythm for people. Next, we have a protein sparing modified fast. Now, this is for people who are very concerned about not losing muscle. And this, we come across this every once in a while. And these are people that are kind of on the line, or they're athletes. They want the benefits of fasting, but they want to make sure that they hang on to their muscle mass. And so what we see here is we're going to reduce calories dramatically, and we're going to eat a lot of protein. And so this will ultimately protect muscles. It can help with metabolic health and insulin sensitivity. And it is a short-term intervention for obesity and metabolic disorders. So, now we're kind of getting into some of these strategies that are tools that are wielded by practitioners in different scenarios. Bone broth fasting is another one that I really like. And this is particularly for people who don't tolerate water or dry fasting. They just need something. Nice thing about bone broth, it's very rich in collagen. It's very rich in minerals. It's kind of nutrient dense. It's not a full-on fast. You're not necessarily going to get the autophagy and the cellular cleanup and the stem cell increase, but you are going to see, because you're getting those collagen and the minerals, you're going to see it's easier, and it's going to be quite good on the joints and muscle recovery. And it's good for gut health as well. So it's protective of the gut because you're getting the collagen, the glycine. The glycine helps with sleep. So this bone broth fasting actually can be a really nice strategy for people who really struggle with the other types of fasting. Then we have, I've kind of already talked, like the fasting with teas, lemon water, vegetable broths. Again, this is for people who struggle with their detoxification system. So they get a lot of Hertz reactions when they fast. This can make it really easy for them. It's also a lot easier on your liver and your kidneys. So if you know you have poor kidney function, even though fasting on paper is good for you, you may actually do much better with liquids, like these types of liquids, to kind of help the kidneys to flush and to work. And we're still going to be supporting our digestion here. We're going to see better skin health, better energy. You might see some improvements in metabolic flexibility, in lipids. So, how often would you do this? So, that 24-hour fast we talked about, doing it 1 day a week or 2 days a week, you could do it with fluids like this. You could do it with the broths and the teas and the lemon waters. And especially if you feel like you can't function on just water alone or dry fasting, this might be a better way to do it, or even the bone broth. Okay. The last one I'm going to talk about, and I'm not going to talk about it too long because we did an entire episode on this last week. It just came out, and this is the fast mimicking diet. The one downside of this one, actually, it's not true. There are fast mimicking diet kind of recipe protocols out on the internet, which you can find. And if you have it in you to cook for yourself during an FMD, then that makes it very cost effective. But the easiest, most powerful way to do FMD is to use the Prolon kit. It's a box. It's got everything you need split up into days. They've got bars, they've got soups, they've got the little packages of olives. They've made it so easy for people. And there's been some incredible research on the FMD that was developed by Dr. Walter Longo. There's a whole book on the fast mimicking diet. And he showed that on that fast mimicking diet, where you're really eating minimal calories, very low protein. So we're only doing it for 5 days. It's okay. All your muscle's not going to melt away, I promise. But what we see here is we see an increase in autophagy and cellular repair. We see longevity and health span go through the roof because metabolic health improves, metabolic flexibility improves, people lose weight. And when he did his studies, he had people do an FMD, people with metabolic derangement who were like, let's say, insulin resistant, they were carrying extra weight, their blood lipids were off, they had high blood pressure, like that whole constellation of symptoms. And he had them do a fast mimicking diet 1 week a month for, I think it was 3 or 4 months. And all the people got healthier. Every one of them. And then in between the FMDs, he, of course, encouraged them to eat a whole food, polyphenol rich plant. I mean, it was plant forward, but they definitely got to eat fish and chicken and some red meat, and found that over the 3 to 4 months, they got massive benefits. So that's kind of the overview. I think that pretty much covers most of the fasting. I mean, there's lots of other ways to fast, obviously, but those are the big ones. Are there peptides that can help with fasting? Like, what are the tools that can help you with fasting? So definitely when you're doing any kind of fast, prioritize sleep. And you want to prioritize sleep because when we don't sleep, we become insulin resistant the next day. We crave carbs. And so it will make fasting harder. A lot harder. So prioritize sleep, give your body the chance to do the work it needs to do. Secondly, especially when you're doing normal, regular fasting, you might be just fine to exercise. But when you're getting into these longer fasts, you're better off doing gentle exercise. Like if you have katsu bands, put them on. If you want to go outside for a walk, great idea. Anything that you can do that's gentle movement to keep the body moving, but that doesn't overstress you, especially on the longer fast, is probably a better idea. When you're doing alternate day fasting, just alternate your workouts, right? So you do your tougher workouts on the days when you're eating, and the days you're not eating, you might do something more restorative and not quite as intense. I mentioned the word peptides. So definitely if you're using GLP-1s, fasting gets a lot easier. And this is where I see fasting as a tool to use the GLP-1s at lower dose and get better results. So in my world, in my mind, we want to use the GLP-1s at the lowest dose that you can get away with and still get results. If you weave any of these fasting practices in with your GLP-1 use, you're going to have an easier time executing the fast, obviously, and you're going to amplify your results. So I think that for those of you who are using any GLP-1s, all of these fasting strategies can be powerful, but make sure that you are focusing on your nutrient density. You're eating your protein forward diet. And here's the other thing. I hear a lot of people say to me, Nat, I find that by the end of the week of using my GLP-1, my appetite is coming back like around day 6 and 7. And so I start eating more. And I think that's actually a good thing. I think that if you can focus on eating the right foods, that creates a cycle with your body where you're reducing your calories naturally for, let's say, 5 days. And then you get to the last couple of days where you start to increase your calories and then you bring them down again on your next dose. So it creates kind of like this push-pull feast-famine thing. If you throw 1 or 2 days of fasting in there or a couple of days of intermittent fasting, you might find that you really accelerate your results. Plus, you're getting all the benefits of reducing inflammation, improving the immune system, like all of the benefits that fasting brings to the table. So GLP-1s, the other peptides that I talk about are the short chain bioregulators. And I find that people who have done a couple of runs of the pancreas, the stomach, and the liver bioregulators very often really see nice benefits in their digestive system as a whole. So the pancreas bioregulator obviously is going to support our pancreas, which is very important in regulating how we uptake glucose and insulin production. The stomach is going to help possibly to upregulate and support the production of digestive enzymes that we know many of us as we're aging don't make as many digestive enzymes. And that is something I will also mention with the GLP-1s. Use digestive enzymes. Don't just rely on your body. Make sure that you're breaking down that food efficiently so that your body can absorb the nutrients. You guys know that probably that I really, really like masszymes. That's one of my favorite digestive enzyme formulas. They're really easy to tolerate. I tend to use like 3 to 4, depending on my meal size, with my meal. And I find that really supports my digestion well. So the pancreas, the stomach for digestive enzymes, and the liver. Of course, anything we can do to support liver health, liver regeneration is going to be beneficial because your liver is there. It's producing glycogen. It's breaking down glycogen. It's managing your blood lipids. It's doing all that detoxification work. So anything we can do to support liver is going to be beneficial. So doing a couple of rounds of the liver, the stomach, and the pancreas, I think is a really nice thing to do when we're addressing metabolic balance and metabolic health. And therefore, when we're instituting a regular fasting protocol. Okay. So you've got a fair amount of information there. If you have any other questions, make sure that you ask. We're going to be putting clips of this episode up on Instagram. So that's a really great opportunity on Instagram to ask questions. Or you can join my private membership community. And there I have a GLP-1 coaching group where I coach people using GLP-1s, and also just in the regular day-to-day group. I do live Q&As in there. We bring in experts. We do all kinds of stuff. And that's the place where you can ask as many questions as you want, and they will get answered, in those live Q&As. So thanks so much for being here. I kind of just launched into this episode, barely did any kind of an intro. You guys know how much I hope you know how much I appreciate you guys. Thank you for being here. And make sure, if you've enjoyed this episode, to leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening to it from. And if you have any questions about the membership community, if you haven't yet signed up for the newsletter or the peptide specific newsletter, by the way, make sure to head over to natniddam.com and you can find all the information about all the things there. So thank you so much for being here. Have an amazing rest of your day or evening whenever you're listening to this. And once again, make sure to let me know if you have questions. Bye for now.